Hi, I'm Morgan, and it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while since I posted a video. Mostly because the world is kind of on fire, and my brain doesn't like that. So, for the past couple of months, I've kind of struggled with reading, never mind making videos. But I'm excited to get back into it and fill you guys in on everything I've been reading. So today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in July and in August. The first book I have to talk about is Three Sisters by Anton Chekhov. This is a play written in like the 1800s. It's Russian and I don't know, it's good. But yeah, like the late 1800s. So it's Russian and kind of vaguely Victorian, obviously not actually Victorian because Victorian kind of refers to Queen Victoria, but you know what I mean, it's that kind of time period. Since it is a Chekhov play, it's all about the realism. Peep those unfinished sentences, everybody's just trailing off in the middle of what they're saying, everything in one act is all set in the same place. You know, true basics of realism, because Chekhov was kind of really just a master of it. And as you might have guessed, it is about three sisters. It follows them over the course of, I think it's a couple of years, because I'm pretty sure, yeah, because there's a baby born at one point. So over the course of like a few years, and it's during the war, I don't know what war, a war of some kind, I believe. But it is mostly just people sitting around and talking about how terrible their lives are, which again is just true 18th century realism, as it should be. I love the sisters, the three main characters. I love them. They deserve a lot because their lives have been bad and they've been trying to make them better. And even if they aren't exactly the perfect people, you know, they're trying. And it's really depressing, but like in a good way. Like that sounds really weird. It's sad, but it's really well written, so it's enjoyable. I'm just sad they never got to go back to Moscow. But it is a classic, and I'm glad I read it. I now need to read The Seagull by Chekhov to complete my weird classic plays. And the next book I read in July was Rebel Woman, which is a collection of academic articles, kind of, separate chapters written by separate people looking at representations of classic Greek plays in kind of the modern day. It talks a lot about the 1900s going into the 2000s, focusing particularly on the female main characters. It's got this wonderful dramatic picture of Fiona Shaw as Medea on the front, which is honestly just a mood. Like this is my mood for the current climate. I've got no rating for this because it is an academic text. I don't always feel like I can give them ratings. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It really just depends on the book. I did really enjoy this. This is for my dissertation. It's a topic that I'm really interested in. And I'm kind of mad that I never got to see a lot of these performances. Just reading descriptions of these different performances and how they conceptualised the classic Greek texts and linked them to the modern day. It's so interesting, and I really wish I'd gotten to see a lot of them when they were originally performed. But I definitely have a couple of translations and kind of adaptations that I want to read that I got told about in here, and I made a lot of notes. Welcome to English literature. I really enjoy books of essays. I think that they give a lot of variety and kind of cover a lot of different things. For me, that was really helpful here because it helped me know what parts I wanted to focus on. So there'll be certain topics that I can go, oh, I want to go read more about that. And they all have sources and a wee bibliography at the end. And as I said, just talking about the adaptations is really interesting, and it helps you kind of see how different people interpret the original text, which is important for me because that's what I'm going to be doing. Yay. And I found this useful for my dissertation and also my own poetry. I'm writing a series about female characters in Greek plays. God knows why I'm doing it, but I am. So I find it really interesting to kind of build my own interpretations. I can't really say I recommend it because it's pretty niche, but it was good. If you're interested in it, I would recommend. The next book I read in July was The 12 by Justin Cronin. I gave this 5 stars. I'm gonna die. By the end of this series, I'm just gonna die of emotion. This is the second book in the series. The first book is The Passage. I talked about it in one of my previous videos. And it's basically set in a post-apocalyptic world, except the apocalypse was vampires. So this is set like 100 years after the apocalypse, but there's a section in here that kind of flashes back to the beginning, and I actually really enjoyed it. I liked seeing how normal people, not people who were related to the project like they were in the original book, reacted to a literal apocalypse. Like, if suddenly there was on the news, there was like, oh no, there are vampires, I would be like, what? I'm sorry, excuse me? And that's kind of what the people react like. They accept it and they like have to look after themselves, but at the same time they're like, what is happening? Which is, they're very relatable. And since I'm a lover of characters, I love seeing how everything is related, how it was kind of meant to be. In this book, it kind of gives the impression of a supernatural element, like all these coincidences aren't really coincidences and they are in fact meant to be. As usual, we love Amy in this house. We love and support her. She deserves better. And I'm actually really interested to see what she becomes in the next book, because she's been so static for like 100 years and she's suddenly cycling through these changes very quickly, or at least what would be very quickly to her since she is literally like immortal. And honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to get over her connection with Wolgast. Is it Wolgast? I always pronounce it wrong. But just, this is kind of a spoiler, but it's not a big spoiler. The fact that she gets to talk to him when she's in the weird vampire mind space, and he's the one she feels safe with, and he's the one who's kind of guiding her into this next part of her life, really gets me. Honestly, I think I cried several times when we got to see him again, because he was one of my favourite characters from the first book. We also saw a lot more of the world in this book, and everything that was going on outside of the colony from the first book, which I really enjoyed because world building is one of my favourite things. I like to know what's going on in the rest of the world. Like, are there other characters who are surviving? And I like that we got to see what happened to some of the people from the original project too. I've forgotten his name, but if you've read this, the asshole who decided to use Grey. Not that I like Grey, because Grey is a sexual predator. But maybe don't use people for immortality. And the last book I read in July was Mr. Pip by Lloyd Jones. This is the first of many books that I'm having to read for my classes next year. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't actually write anything down for this in my notes because it was kind of I think I gave it like 3 stars maybe. It was very mediocre. Like, it was fine. I do want to discuss this one in class because I don't really know how I feel about it. It's about a young girl in, I don't even know where it is. Like, the description of where it is kind of weird. It's basically a young girl on what is described as a tropical island. Like, it literally says that on the back. I just realised there's no blurb. There's no blurb. I hate books that don't have blurbs. What's the point in that? It's just someone else talking about the book. I don't want to know what the reviewer said. I want to read the blurb. You can tell I'm kind of frustrated with it. But it's about this girl on a tropical island and her family, and there's kind of a civil war going on. And there's this one white guy who starts teaching the children by reading them Great Expectations. And I don't think it was like a typical white savior narrative, because if it was, I would have absolutely hated it. The focus is mostly on Matilda, the young girl, and as she grows and how she learns more about the world, and she learns about this man and kind of learns to see him as fallible. She learns to see that he isn't completely without flaws, but that he wanted to give them something kind of to keep them going and to give them hope. I think it was also kind of realistic in that people died and there was actually consequences of the war. So I thought that part was interesting, but I want to discuss it more. Also, I don't think I actually said, but it's written by a white man. So that's kind of why I'm not sure how I feel about it. Not just because of that. I mean, it was the same when I was reading it and I was like, this, a fully grown man is writing a small girl, and that can work. Like, adults can write children, but sometimes it just kind of feels, how do I say this? Too much? I don't know. If anyone's ever read this, please give me opinions in the comments, because I don't know how I feel. So that was July. I really didn't read a lot in July. I kind of had to force myself to read those books. I wasn't having a good time. My brain was just not vibing with it. And you know, coronavirus is kind of bringing everybody down at the moment because we're all still trying to exist. Now on to August, where I did actually read some things. The first book I read was Vox by Christina Dalcher. I think it's Dalcher, maybe Dalsher. I don't know. I gave this 2 stars. I didn't like it. I just didn't. I didn't like it. I'm a fan of these kind of dystopian, kind of feminist novels. I love The Handmaid's Tale. I enjoyed The Power. But this just did not do it for me at all. It was such a disappointment. This is basically a kind of Handmaid's Tale-esque dystopia where a super religious group takes over the United States and forces women to wear a contraption that basically electrocutes them if they say more than 100 words a day. I really liked the premise. I thought it was a really interesting place to take the kind of misogynistic dystopia, and wasn't really one I'd kind of seen covered before. It seems kind of exaggerated, but at the same time, as a woman, you can kind of be like, yeah, I understand how they would do that. But the book itself just didn't live up to my expectations. First of all, Jean was not a bad character, but she really annoyed me. And she didn't seem like a woman who had been living in an oppressive society for a year. She made some really weird decisions, and she was worryingly bold for a woman who knows by now that there are punishments that they will happily dole out. And none of the other characters particularly stood out. They weren't overly well developed, so I wasn't really invested in any of them. And then the plot was just way too contrived for me. There were just way too many coincidences. Starting with Jean knowing Jackie personally, like them being like best pals, and also Jackie being this activist woman. And then also her husband's job with the administration. It was too much of a coincidence. And then there was just way too much going on. We had the general kind of dystopian living, which you'd expect in any dystopian novel. There was the kind of underground rebellion, again, not a surprise. But then there was Jean's affair and her pregnancy. And then there was the whole plot with her son Stephen, which was completely irrelevant to the rest of the novel. Like, you could have taken that out and it wouldn't have changed anything. Way too many things happened and they weren't given the weight they should have been given. I feel like if they had been given the correct treatment and the correct kind of seriousness, I might have enjoyed it more. Even if they all happened, like maybe if it had been a bigger book and they had all been given kind of the amount of focus and page time that they should have been given, then I might have been okay with the fact that so much happened. And then there was, oh my god, I forgot about this, the pure coincidence of Jean's mum needing that same medical treatment that she was being told to make. Mind-blowingly stupid. Like, that was too much for me. There was already so many coincidences, but when I got to that part, I was like, why? You didn't need that. And then also, outside of like the speaking and writing, like her not being able to say words and not being able to write things down, not being able to read, there wasn't any other obstacles for Jean. She could just go about her daily life the way she wanted to. She was allowed to drive, she was allowed to go wherever she wanted. Nobody ever stopped her and asked her where her husband was. It didn't seem like a fully realised dystopia for me. Not that not being able to talk would be fine, that's not what I mean. But it seemed, the not being able to talk seemed really extreme for the society that was portrayed. It just didn't fit. So overall, I didn't believe in the story. I wasn't invested in any of it. And by the time I got to the end, I was like, this might as well happen. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it just seemed like it was all just too easy. And Jean should have been caught. The amount of things that she did, and she should have been caught. No, I can't. I'm sorry. I give up. Laura, if you're watching this, I don't know if you liked it, but I'm so sorry. I can't handle it. So now I am attempting to learn how to edit properly. So hopefully you will have a book in this area. Here, have a book cover. And it should be The Good Immigrant, which is a book with various authors and is edited by Nikesh Shukla. I'm so sorry. I give this 4 stars. It is a non-fiction collection of essays reflecting on the immigrant experience in the UK. I don't really have a lot to say because it is a non-fiction about racism and the experiences of people of colour, so it's not really my place to have an opinion about the actual content of the book. But I found it really interesting. I found it really helpful for reflecting on the British experience specifically, because a lot of what gets shared on the internet is American. Not that that's a problem, and I have read a lot of, you know, books, sources, I can't think of other words. I've seen a lot of stuff and I've consumed a lot of media reflecting on the American experience, but as a British person, I think it's important for us to recognise that there's still a lot of racism in this country, and actually looking at the experiences of people of colour in our country is extremely useful for analysing your own reactions and your own kind of opinions about things that happen. Now, as I've said earlier, I do like essay collections, but the thing about them being by various different authors is that the writing quality and the substance of the essays can differ greatly between authors, which is why I gave it 4 stars, because there was a few that I just didn't find as well written. Again, I can't say anything about the content, but they just weren't as well written, so it kind of stopped the flow of the book, if that makes sense. Writing wise, I did have a couple of favourites, and they were My Name Is My Name, Airports and Auditions, Shade, and Death Is a Many-Headed Monster. So I definitely would recommend checking it out, and those were the ones that I thought were really well written. Again, new book cover, hopefully. It's not technically a book cover, because this is a short story. So the Hugos did a kind of online award ceremony this year. For those of you who don't know what the Hugos is, it's a kind of sci-fi and fantasy book award thing. I think it's just sci-fi and fantasy. That's what I know it as. And obviously due to coronavirus, they couldn't do their usual ceremony, so they did it online. And there was a lot of controversy about the presenting. So if you want to know about tea, Google it. But when I was checking out who won what, because I didn't watch it, but I wanted to know if any authors that I liked had won things, I realised that they have a short story section, which I didn't know. They have like a short story award section. So I wrote a bunch of them down and I've been trying to read them, because a lot of them are available online through Tor.com or Uncanny Magazine. I think that's what it's called. So I have a couple of these to talk about. The first one is The Archaeology of Love. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's not really a word. It's like a word made up for the sci-fi, so I don't know. And I also don't have the author written down. I'll put that on the screen. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a short story about a woman whose husband had died on this colony on Mars, and she and her like teammates and people that she works with are trying to figure out what happened on the colony. And they use this kind of machine that allows them to experience the past. I really loved that part of it, the kind of science fiction machine, the experiencing of the past. I thought it was really interesting, looking at a way for us to learn about history and kind of remember things that have happened and not forget people, which I thought was really nice. I also really liked the relationship between the main character and her husband, MJ and Saki, I think it was. That could be wrong. But I felt like their relationship was portrayed really well and it seemed really strong, even though it was a short story. And I really wanted them to meet again. I really wanted them to find each other. And I felt the pain alongside Saki as she realised what had happened and knew that she had to move on. The next book I read was another book for my university classes, and that was Affinity by Sarah Waters. Some of you may know her as the author of Fingersmith, because that's the only one I've heard of, like a lot. I gave this 3 stars. Yeah, it was fine. I just want to say that I saw someone refer to her on Goodreads as the lesbian Dickens, and that made me laugh so much. I thought it was a beautiful description. This is a story about a Victorian lady who starts visiting with a medium who's currently in jail, and she gets sucked in by the medium's story and the intrigue of the supernatural. I loved that most of the characters were women. It's very Jane Austen-esque in that it's focusing on the stories of women. It focuses on their lives, their place in society, and their interior worlds. It's also undoubtedly gay, which is nice, even though it wasn't like overly explicit and there was no like dramatic loving relationship. But you know, gay Victorian ladies, I'm here for it. I did like the mystery. I enjoyed learning alongside Margaret about Selena's past and who she was and the things that she did and the kind of circumstances that led her to be where she was. However, this part has spoilers, so I think it's just spoilers for the rest of this. Yes, so if you don't want to hear spoilers, wait until this book goes away. I didn't figure out that Ruth and Viggers were the same person, so that was a good twist. When it got to that part, I was like, oh, now I know what's happening. And I also liked that it was left unanswered if Ruth and Peter were the same person, or if Peter really is a ghost and they were just using him to exploit the women. I liked that. I liked that the supernatural aspect, while we found out that it was Ruth who did a lot of the things, the supernatural aspect wasn't completely undermined, which I enjoyed. However, I did find it extremely anticlimactic. I don't feel like I got a lot of closure personally, and I wish Margaret had gotten a better ending because she's already been through a lot, and having Selena manipulate her like that was just, you know, the poor woman deserves more. And that would have been me as a sad Victorian lesbian. So, I don't know. I felt an affinity towards her. I think I'm funny. Okay, so the next two books I have to talk about, I'm kind of just going to talk about together. I read two translations of Medea. One by Diane Arnson Severian, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. And the other one by Diane J. Rare. Is it Rare or Rayner? Hold on. Rare. Doesn't sound like a name. So these are my two copies of Medea. I also have an old-fashioned copy of Medea, and I still don't know which one I'm going to use for my dissertation because I don't like them. I bought these because I wanted to read a woman's translation, because the other two that I'm using are Anne Carson translations, but I didn't like them. I felt like some of the language was kind of clunky, like the translation had maybe been too direct instead of actually trying to get across what they were saying, which Anne Carson does a lot. But it is Euripides, and Euripides likes to be extremely blunt, so I'm gonna have to choose one of these soon. Wish me luck. The next book I read was The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. I absolutely loved this. I gave it 5 stars. It helped a lot with my reading slump because it is YA and it's really well written YA, and really well written YA means I can read it really fast. So I did. I read it in like 2 days. It was great. I felt like I was back in like P7 first year. I was like, I'm 12 again. This is a pretty well known book, but in case you've never heard of it or you don't really know what it's about, this is about Star Carter, who is a black teenage girl in America, and she witnesses the death of her childhood best friend Khalil at the hands of a police officer. Star and her family and friends were really well written. Her community and her life were extremely believable and interesting. Star also acted her age, which I like. She had a good mix of being childish and mature, which does make her seem like an actual 16-year-old, which is something you don't get in a lot of YA books. This book covers a lot of important issues, and issues that are especially important right now with everything that's been going on recently. And personally, I think it's all written really well. It's obviously not my place to pass judgment on the depiction of racism, but I think it was written clearly enough that the intended audience would be able to easily understand and digest what Angie Thomas is trying to say. There was also a really good understanding of teen culture and black culture, but of course for me that was more of a look into something I don't really understand, but I did like that it was easily kind of threaded in with the story, as it should be. Everyone's culture of a character should be able to just be part of the book. But particularly I found that Angie Thomas writes teenagers really well. Again, I sound so judgmental. You don't get that in a lot of YA, but I just know that as a teenager, I would read YA and be like, this is so cringy. Or like Becky Albertalli, whose books I enjoy, sometimes I'll be reading them and I'll be like, no, you can tell that it's an adult writing teenagers. You can tell that it's a millennial trying to write Gen Z, if you get what I mean. So I think I'll check out her other stuff because I think that I'll enjoy the writing. I also really liked that even though Khalil was actually only present at the very beginning of the book, he was still an endearing and well-rounded character, which is A+ characterization, making us, you know, love someone who is dead in the first like 30 pages, I think is talented, and I would definitely recommend this if you haven't already read it. The next book I have to talk about is, unfortunately, another dissertation book. I'll put it here. It's called Performing Epic and Telling Tales by Fiona McIntosh and Justine McConnell. Yes, I read this entire thing for my dissertation. Yes, I'm counting it. My brain hurts. I found this interesting. It talked about a lot of different things that I'm interested in, and focused on kind of modes of storytelling and how ancient Greek stories have been told in the modern day. Not just plays, which is my focus, but also it talked about like the Iliad and the Odyssey. And it kind of looked at modes of storytelling from like the 17th century up until now. It talked about like podcasts, and it mentioned Hadestown, and I was like, this is all of my favourite things in one! So yeah, I actually enjoyed it, even though it was an academic text. Again, no rating, because it fried my brain. The last book I read was How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The title kind of sums up what it's about, and I gave it 5 stars. It was extremely well written. I would definitely recommend this. It was very educational. There was a lot of statistics and research, along with critically looking at how history has affected the world that we live in today. Obviously, the focus of the book is race and racism, but Kendi made an effort to be intersectional, which I always appreciate in books like these. He talks about issues he himself had to unlearn, and the book encourages you to dissect your own motives and unconscious biases. And overall, I think it was really, really well written. So it was both entertaining in that we learned about his life, and educational because we also learn a lot about why things are the way they are. And those are all the books I've read since you last saw me. Honestly, I thought I hoped I would have read more, but I didn't, and I don't know, I'm trying not to beat myself up about that. I don't think any of us should be disappointed in ourselves if we've not been as productive as we feel like we should have been. I know that's really hard to do, because personally I do it like a lot. I haven't written in forever. I haven't touched my novel in literal months. And I wrote a poem for the first time since March last week. And it was really nice. It was cathartic because I enjoy writing and I enjoy finishing things. But it was also nice to not punish myself for it. I just felt proud that I'd gotten it done. And I don't know, I want to encourage you all to do the same. Don't think about what you haven't done, think about what you have. And if all you've done is got up and eat your breakfast, I'm really proud of you. And you should be proud of yourself too. I know that it can be really hard. I also live in that kind of world where sometimes life is just hard. I'm just trying to be proud of myself if all I've done is read one book. But I'm really glad I got this video done. Hopefully I'll get it out to you guys for next Wednesday. I mean, hopefully it'll be Wednesday when you guys are watching this. Because it's Friday right now while I record. Hopefully I'll get it done. I don't know, I'm going to be freaking out over dissertation stuff because my extended proposal is due on the 16th. That's all I'm going to be talking about for like the next 3 months. So I'd like to apologise in advance. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it to the end, I'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe. Come chat to me in the comments, or come chat to me on my social medias, which will all be linked in the description down below. Let me know what you guys have been reading for the last couple of months, what you've been up to, how have you been spending your time in the end of summer lockdown, because I've been doing nothing. So I'd love to live vicariously through all of you. Thank you for watching. Bye!